Hello and welcome to this episode from Range Woodworking. Now it's been a long day and it's time for a hard-earned beer. Now people are always telling me how hard it is to buy gifts for me, which is fair enough, but I love a beer. So here are a few scrapwood gift ideas for beer lovers. Firstly, we have the humble coaster. Now I know it's not particularly imaginative, but stick with me. The gift ideas get a bit more unusual and unique as we move forwards. So first things first, the coaster.
So yeah, coasters, really quick, really easy, basically just tiny edge grain cutting boards, which I think might be one of the first woodworking projects any of us do. Burning through this, I collect my scrap, I cut the scrap down into strips, making sure to hit one of the pin nails in my push block thing. Then I'll arrange the strips into a pretty pattern and glue them up whilst trying to keep everything as flat as possible. Use the magic of editing to remove all of the clamps at once, and then treat myself to a mini dose of glue scraping. Tidy them up and bring them to a uniform thickness in the thicknesser before giving the full panel a sand. I find it's easy to sand the panel now rather than as individual coasters after they've been cut to size. Speaking of, I set a stop block to the exact width of my panel and cut out a set of nice square coasters before giving the edges a quick hand sand. I'll apply a finish, usually just a mineral oil and paste wax, but today I'm using Rubio Monocoat because I had some out from finishing another project. Finally, I'll stick on some adhesive cork backing that I'm sure everyone has just laying around, and the coasters are all finished. On to the next gift.
Okay, so now that's out of the way, moving forwards, we have this, a mash paddle, a universal symbol for beer brewers around the world. So it's brew day for me today, and it's time to mash in with all of my grain and my trusty mash paddle. Now this stainless steel mash paddle, it's fine. It does the job, but it just lacks a bit of soul. So I think for a gift idea, we should do something about that. See? So the great thing about making new mash paddles is they can be made out of sort of little bits of scrap that you might not use for anything else. I have this very dilapidated piece of Tasmanian oak that, as you can see, just isn't good for anything, but there is a good usable length down the end here, which should be plenty.
So naturally, the first step with this is to cut away that smashed up, splintery, unusable part of the board. And to do this, I'll just measure to make sure the paddle will be long enough, and then cut it down with a circular saw. Rather than just winging this and making it up on the fly, I felt that it would be best to make a template. That's what a real professional YouTube woodworker would do, right? So I tear off some butcher paper, say a quick prayer to the art gods listening, and embark upon a brief artistic journey. Unfortunately, I was mistaken, the art gods were having a day off, and my journey resulted in sketches that I can only describe as abominable. And then I remember that I have a vague competency in Adobe Illustrator, so I'll do some weird robot walk and go knock up what I think is a well-proportioned template that I can print out at full scale. Which kind of feels like cheating.
Yeah.
But when all is said and done, I have some sweet templates that I'll cut out with a rule and a sharp knife before taping the top and bottom parts to my board. I'll make sure to align the center of the template with the center line that I've marked on that board. And once that template is all secured, I can trace around the outside of it with a good thick Sharpie. I use a thick line to give me some wiggle room when I cut it out later that will let me refine it down to that final shape. Now, with my template, I've specified the size of some of these tighter bends, and I'll use a Forstner bit to get that right. I'll give the Forstner bit a tap with a hammer to mark where to drill. I'll also use a Forstner bit for the holes in the paddle, but I am too lazy to hammer each one out, so I'll just go use my automatic center punch to get things moving. Now, you can drill these with a normal drill like I am here, but to keep things tidier, I'd rather use the drill press. And then, once they're all drilled out, I can cut the rough shape of the paddle. I am using my bandsaw here. I have a love-hate relationship with my bandsaw. Well, actually, it's just hate. It's cheap, the blade wonders, it walks all over my workbench while I'm using it, and the dust collection is non-existent. But in this setting, with what I have, it's the best tool for the job. A jigsaw would do a good job, but it would have more tear out, and securing the workpiece would be troublesome. Like I said earlier, I'm cutting to my line, making sure not to go inside of my line, and that way I can sand it to its final shape by removing the line. And once I'm done, I can do a weird bit of air paddling to test the ergonomics of the paddle, although it looks more like I'm planning on canoeing than brewing. And it's time to finally get around to that final shaping I keep talking about. I'll use a combination of tools for this, with the disc sander being handy for straight bits and rasps for shaping around the handle. Finally, I'll sand the faces using the offcuts to stop the sander tipping on the skinny bits, and then a quick round over on the edges to feel better in the hand. Unfortunately, that was followed by what feels like a million more tiny roundovers in the paddle holes before a quick bit of personalization. Well, there you have it. We're all finished and we're ready to mash in, so let's put it to use. But I can't quite bring myself to do it, so I'm going to put some finish on this and give it to my dad, and he can put it up on the wall. Back to Old Faithful, I guess. Okay, so for my final-ish contraption, we have this. It's a 6-pint carrier. So you'll never have to worry about trying to negotiate through a herd of people carrying 6 pints on a tray ever again. I'm going to use this collection of old pieces of scrap camphor from when I made my letterbox a few years ago. I'll link that video in the description. And as you can see, there's all sorts of shapes and sizes here, but I'm pretty sure I can make this work. By now, I'm sure you're sick of seeing people prepare timber. So with the magic of a finger click, we can skip forwards to these glued up panels. And after a quick minute or two with the thicknesser, we have a number of pieces for the tops, bottoms, sides, and the arms. Now here we have a standard pint glass, my favourite pint glass in fact, and it has an outer diameter of about 80 millimeters. Unfortunately, the only way I have on hand to cut these holes out is with these hole saws. First things first, I want to cut a hole in a scrap piece to make sure it fits. But unfortunately, the hole saws must be aware that I hate them and have organised an insurrection of some kind. After surviving more kickbacks than I care to admit, a dead battery, and then snapping my scrap in half, I decided I should just lift the drill press up and do this properly. Not long after that, I have one test piece and I'm happy with the fit around the pint. So I'll cut all my pieces down to the same width, and then all of my tops and bottoms to length. Then after a nervous little minute or two with the hole saw again, we've got our bases, tops and sides. To give the side pieces a little profile, I'm going to whip them through the bandsaw, but this time at least I had the foresight to tape all of the same size pieces together, just to speed things up a bit. Now, I need to drill holes for the articulating arms on the side. I'm pretty simple, so I just need to remember to put one on the bottom of the top tier, a top and a bottom in the middle, and a top in the bottom, right? I'll use a brad point bit with scrap behind it to prevent any blowout, and to keep everything tidy before giving all the pieces a quick sand, because, well, they're still pretty furry in places. To glue the carriers up, I just use a small amount of glue to minimize squeeze out, and then some screws to hold it all together whilst the glue sets up. Apparently, I just can't resist spending that extra second picking the best looking side to face up. Now I have to make articulating arms, and I wasn't sure how difficult this would be. So firstly, I tried as simply as possible without doing any maths or anything challenging. I put the pieces down next to each other and put a shim in place to ensure a small gap when they're all resting. Then I just measure from the approximate center of one hole to the other. I was then going to try cut the pieces out on the table saw and drill the holes as accurately as possible, but I figured it would be a lot quicker to just cut them out with the laser. And then whilst that's going, I can replace all the screws with some tiny dowels, which will just look a heap better. And by tiny dowels, I mean bamboo food skewers that do a great job. This will strengthen that butt joint and also add a nice visual contrast. Off camera, I sprayed some quick drying varnish on the carriers and added some paste wax to the arms. And then it's time for assembly. Some small brass screws hold the handle in place, and then I decide a second one on each side is a good idea to stop the handle spinning involuntarily. Then a bolt, a nut and washers are put together with a bit of thread locker to hold the nut in place, as I won't really be tightening them very much. And there you have it, a scrap wood 6-pint carrier.
And just in case any of you are as cynical as I am, here it is in action. Now I am a little bit nervous about this because it is the first run I've done with any liquid in any of the glasses, but we'll see how we go. For a walk. Well, that about wraps up this episode from Range Woodworking. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any other gift ideas, feel free to comment them below. I'll keep an eye out and maybe I'll do a part 2. If you're not already, please consider liking and subscribing. And until next time, take it easy. Cheers.